Normally around this time of the year, Abdul Karim Hussein's farm in Sudan's Blue Nile state, near the border with Ethiopia, has more fruits. But the farmer says the past year has been different than previous years, and he blames it on changes in the Blue Nile River just meters away.
فقدنا الطمي.
We lost the silt we get from the river. Every year the river comes from the Ethiopian highlands carrying a lot of silt. It's good for our river irrigated farms because it changes the soil, but the past year has brought less silt because of the Renaissance Dam storing water, and we don't know if we'll get it this year.
Abdul Karim's farm is one of hundreds of thousands of acres in the state that lie along the banks of the Blue Nile and depend on the river for irrigation. But the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam being built upstream on one of the two sources of the river is raising concerns. It's said to be Africa's largest hydroelectric dam upon completion, and Ethiopia says it'll lift more than half of its population out of poverty. But in downstream Sudan, farmers fear it will reduce their productivity. MOHAMMED MUSTAFA's farm lies nearly 500 kilometers down the river, near the Sudanese capital Khartoum. He says even he has noted changes in the soil since the first filling of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
The effects of the Renaissance Dam have been bad for us. If there is no silt, then there will be no farming because we need it for the soil. Last year there was very little silt and so we couldn't farm crops. And where we farmed, the crops died because of soil quality.
Talks to reach a deal about the filling and operation of the dam have repeatedly failed. Sudan says information sharing is critical during this process. Sudan's government says nearly 5 million people suffered the impacts of the first filling of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that was completed last year without an agreement. This year, the government says 20 million people, or half the population, will be affected. That includes not only farmers along the Nile, but millions of people who rely on the river for their water supplies. That's because, unlike last year, when 4.9 billion cubic meters of water was stored, the second filling is expected to store 13.5 billion cubic meters. Those who rely on the Nile for water are afraid of shortages after last year's filling created problems for some water treatment plants. The Renaissance Dam's environmental impact is also yet to be fully revealed. Those who rely on the river for other means of livelihood say changes in the past year have affected their trade.
We
rely on mud, silt and water from the Nile to make bricks. The most important is silt because it's what keeps the materials together. Otherwise it's just a block of mud. But silt has reduced since last July. That's meant bricks of lower quality which we have to sell cheaper.
The third phase of filling the Renaissance Dam is scheduled to happen next year. No new rounds of talks have been announced yet, but for many, like Abdul Karim, the hope is that something is worked out before the changes to their farms become irreversible. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Al-Bageir, Sudan.
Well, let's now hear from Nada Nur-al-Din. He is a professor of soil and water sciences at Cairo University. He joins us now from there. Professor, I want to focus on the practicalities of the second filling. Now, Ethiopia is saying it's done, and I recall the first filling went much more quickly than expected because of the rains. How's this one gone?
So far, the first announcement of Ethiopia about the second refilling will be 6.9 billion cubic meter. And the second announcement is claimed that Ethiopia tried to reach 13.5 billion cubic meter by the half of next August. But we don't know so far the real volume of the water that Ethiopia will refill in the second refill, because the working in increase the highest of the middle wall that prevent the river Nile stream. It is still working even under heavy rain and under flooding, and the Italian company claimed that they have a new technique for cementing and for concrete can tolerant to against heavy rain and against flooding, and thus we are not sure if the total refill of the second refill will be 6.5 or will be 13.5.
Okay, well, so volumes of water in the dam aside, we know that Ethiopia is now saying there should be no change to the water level of the Blue Nile because of the rains that we've seen. I know there have been some contradictory reports from Sudan about whether or not there's actually been a drop in the water levels of the Blue Nile since this filling began. Presumably Egypt is also keeping an eye on things. Have you noticed a drop?
Yeah, this is a great drop because what's the meaning of reservoir? That's mean Ethiopia will store water more than they permitted to flow of a stream of water. The water discharge of the Blue Nile will decrease sharply to be only between 50 to 70 million cubic meter a year, and they will store between 300 up to 400 million cubic meter, a day, not a year. And this is means Ethiopia will give Sudan and Egypt only 20% of the amount of water that they used to receive in this time every year, and this is make a suddenly shock for decreasing of water requirement in Sudan by 80%.
So, sorry,
and this is what happened. Yes.
I do want to be
Sudan,
clear, sorry, because there's obviously a huge amount of discrepancy about the various different opinions about how much water will continue flowing down the Blue Nile. I'm curious, since the second filling began, have you noticed a specific drop in water in the Blue Nile? Because the Ethiopians are saying because of the rains, there's been no drop. Are you in Egypt there noticing a drop in the water levels?
We don't know if the flooding this year will be high or will be short. We don't have if we have a plenty of water or not, because we are in the beginning of the rain season in Ethiopia, and that's the drop of water. It's maybe according to how much Ethiopia will store in this second refill. But of course the decrease or the reduced of the amount of water that received by Egypt and Sudan will decrease by 80%, if this is what you asked about.
Right, so clearly quite a lot of uncertainty still there about water levels. Nadia Nur al-Din, Professor of Soil and Water Sciences at Cairo University, thank you for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us on Al Jazeera, sir.
You're welcome.